From the Chattanooga Hamfest of 2019, Howard Michael, WB2ITX, gives us a presentation on the future of the ARRL, and it's coming up right now.
Shut up and sit down.
Hey guys, welcome to Ham Radio 2.0. My name's Jason. I'm KC5HWB. And on this channel, we do reviews and how-tos of everything that's new in amateur radio. So if that's something that interests you, consider subscribing below and smashing that like button. So today, this is the forum presentation that I recorded at the Delta Division Convention for the ARRL in Chattanooga of Howard Michael, WB2ITX, who gives us a presentation on his outlook for the current state of the ARRL, where he sees it going, some new ventures they're coming to, and just a general future plans for the ARRL. I thought it was a good presentation, but I'd be interested to hear what you had to say. So put your comments in the YouTube video below, and I hope you like the episode.
Breaking the pile up, go for it.
Yeah, breaking the pile up, that's good. I want to welcome all of you to the ARRL Forum this morning at 10 o'clock. What we're going to do here is we have the ARRL CEO, Howard Michael, with us, all the way down from Hartford, as well as Dan Henderson, who is the Regulatory and Information Chairman for ARRL. Dan's not in here right now. He's wrapping up a couple things somewhere else. But I'm going to turn this over to Howard. He has a presentation to give this morning, and I've asked him to do that. And then I'm going to turn it over to David, and if we get a couple minutes at the end of the meeting, I may say a couple of words. For those of you who do not know already, and I'd be hard-pressed to think that you don't, this is my last official Hamfest as a section manager for Tennessee. To say that I haven't enjoyed it would be an outright bald-faced lie, because I've enjoyed every minute of it for the last 8 years. I even have friends up from Louisiana that came up to see us. The section manager, John Mark Robinson, one of his sidekicks, Keith Barnes, can't remember the call, Steve. Keith? W5KB. Okay. So these folks are up here from Louisiana. I've seen some folks in from all the way over in West Tennessee, up around Union City. Got a good group of folks that's been here this year, along with all of the fine folks down here in the Chattanooga region, and we appreciate all of you coming. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the ARRL CEO, Howard Michael.
So thank you, Keith. And I want to thank all the volunteers for making these Hamfests, this one in particular, available. It's a lot of work, and I think that often goes unappreciated. So let's give a round of applause to all the volunteers that made this. So as Keith said, I'm the CEO, ARRL, Delta Division Convention. So why am I here? Make a presentation, obviously. You couldn't find a better speaker, I guess, right? So we're going to have an agenda. There's going to be a quiz at the end. That's the professor and me. No.
Taking notes.
So none of those are true. None of those are true. So I'm here to start a conversation. And so my view is members and volunteers plus staff working together are where the success comes from. One without the other doesn't work. And the conversation has to be two ways. That means I talk, you talk, we listen to each other. And my sense is that a conversation is a personal thing. So you need to know a little bit about me. Who am I? So if you read my bio, I'm a retired Air Force officer. That's actually a picture of me when I was a pilot. Seems like a second lifetime ago. My hair was darker, my weight was a little lighter. Retired from the military, I became a professor. What's the three best things about teaching? June, July, and August. This is July. So when I was a professor, I also was a volunteer leader of the IEEE. IEEE is the world's largest technical professional association 420,000 members, a little bit bigger than the league, but very similar to the league. It's a volunteer-driven, volunteer-led organization. It depends on a field organization. ARRL depends on a field organization. So it isn't just staff working magic up in Hartford. It's staff and volunteers working together. And I learned that in IEEE. I retired from the university. People tell me I keep failing at retiring. I took a job as a founding CTO for a tech company in China, building robots for STEM education, hardware, software, and curriculum. So that gave me an insight into how to innovate, how to create change in an organization, how to move quickly. I use the term with the staff, fail fast, which is a Silicon Valley kind of startup tech term, right? Let's try something. We can spend a year and a half studying something, and then do something, and then find it's not the right thing, and we're 2 or 3 years down the road. Instead, let's take a shot, do something. If it works, build on it. If it doesn't work, try something different. So you can see some of the innovations I'm trying to develop along those lines. So who am I? I'm the what's called a guardian. I was first licensed 1969, so 50 years. And I consider myself a tinkerer. I like to take things apart, see how they work, put them back together. Sometimes they even work when I put them back together. But I like to take things apart. And when I was younger, I was doing that, with technology. As I got older, I realized I was doing that with companies. Take them apart, figure out how they work, improve them, put them back together. And since October, I've been the CEO of ARRL. So how do I see ARRL? And so I see ARRL as 3 things, and the 3 things have to operate in balance. First and foremost, we're a membership association. We as a group come together with a common purpose. What is that common purpose? It's defined in our 501c3 status. If you look at our Articles of Association, ARRL, from its beginning, exists for the public good. And you said it again, we exist for the public good. We can't forget that. That's why we are members of ARRL. It's not to get QST. We can subscribe to a magazine, but we do more than that. We belong to a group. We have local organizations. We work for common good. That lets us become a tax-exempt organization. The federal government grants tax-exempt status to organizations that exist for the public good. It also allows us to collect donations. So I'm going to give a plug for Diamond Club. If you're not contributing to Diamond Club, please do so. But the real purpose in my mind of the 501c3 status is it defines why we are the ARRL. And the third aspect of this 3-legged stool is we're a business. The business is a nonprofit business, but it still has to operate with the financial discipline that a business operates. Because if we don't have the resources, we can't do anything for the members or for the status. So as I said, all 3 must exist in balance. So as a membership association, I see this again as a 3-legged stool. It has to exist in balance. Members and local clubs and staff. We're going to be hiring a club coordinator to work with the clubs. But I think we also need to think about new clubs, new types of clubs. One of the first events that I was at, Emory University in New York City, I was talking to a club, quote-unquote club. They were a club for the New York City Marathon. They had one event that they wanted to do every year, and they needed an infrastructure to organize to support that, to get volunteers together for that one day. It's very different than the clubs that I grew up with, the club that I belong to. And I said, this is a new kind of club. We need to feed this kind of club. We need to help this kind of club. There's clubs that want to help students. There's clubs that want to do public service. All these kind of clubs, I think, need support. We don't want to have volunteers repeating the same work over and over when we can provide an infrastructure that allows them to multiply their efforts instead of adding their efforts. And staff clubs and members. And this is actually the reality of what I see. I think it's lack of communications. I hear it from both sides. It's an us versus them kind of mentality. They don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. Not invented here, it's not up to our standards, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if you're honest, you're going to say, you can see yourself saying some of those things, and I can see the staff at headquarters saying some of those things. And I think it's about managing expectations and communications. So that's one of the reasons I'm here to start a conversation, is I want to engage people and understand what your needs are, what your concerns are, where you want to go forward. And I want to do the same thing with you, explain to you what my needs are, what my concerns are, and how I want to move the league forward. So, as I said, we're 501c3. So there's a governing hierarchy of documents, there's federal law, state law, all the way down. Articles of Association, as I said, if you haven't looked at those, you might want to do that. In one of my editorials, I talked about some of the points in the Articles of Association. And so I said, bottom line, we exist for the public good. What do we mean by that? It's our 5 pillars, right? Advance the art, the science, the enjoyment of amateur radio. We're going to engage the public. We're going to make sure everybody benefits from ham radio communication. So most of my talk is going to be on the business aspect. So we're a business, or nonprofit business. We need to operate with financial discipline that you would expect from a $15 million organization. I got 87 employees up at Hartford. Their lives, literally financial, on the jobs they have. And so when I got there in October, how do we move forward? And so the first thing I need to do is analyze, understand what people are doing, why they're doing it, what the external environment is doing to us. I need to design something based on that analysis to where we want to be, and then I need to implement that design. So that's kind of what my office looked like when I'm trying to... ARRL has lots of data.
The youth forum is starting right now in the room off the lobby up front. The youth forum, please head that way.
Nobody in this room, okay.
We got a couple of scouts back here.
We got the scouts.
We got the youth back here, right here.
So I stole some of the youth forum members, okay. And so I looked at the organization from a business perspective. And when I got there, quite frankly, the organization was a bunch of stovepipe, siloed organizations. You know, we looked at things the way they evolved, and they didn't cross boundaries. So we had awards, we had membership, we had publishing, advertising, VEC. These were all sources of revenue that existed in isolation from each other. There was a little crossover, but it wasn't consciously thought of as a homogeneous whole. We had development, we had personal finances supporting these things. But as they existed, frankly, all the businesses were under attack. By that I mean sources of revenue were declining. Membership is always a struggle, not just in ARRL, but all organizations now. People don't join clubs anymore. They do join causes. A lot of people want to volunteer for a particular thing. So I think, we need to look at it the right way. Advertising revenue is down. Publishing revenue is down. The VE program, I think, is stable, but it could flip in a heartbeat if we don't innovate in that space. Awards, well, with the sunspots, they're down, right? So we're 157,000 members. We all chose to join ARRL to belong to a group. And this is what the membership trends look like. You can see where the board raised the dues. Right. But membership trend is generally going up. I think this is a positive sign. But I have a concern.
What's the highest membership ever recorded?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think 160,000 something. What's the maximum number of members we've ever had ARRL? 170. Okay. So the problem, though, is there's 30,000 new licensees a year. Of the 30,000, we get 17 to 18% that join the league. And within a year, 40% of those 17% leave because they're not finding value in what we're providing. Yes.
How does that 61% retention rate compare to other organizations?
So it's lower. It is. So the question was, how does that retention rate compare to other organizations? It's lower.
You find that the loss of membership is not so much a result of the league's failures, but of the local community's failures to support the league.
So the question is, what's the cause of the members leaving, right? I'm going to get into a lot of detail. We have a lot of information that shows us that. I'm going to show you the things we're doing actually to counter some of those trends. It's across the board, though. It isn't just we don't have the products and services. It's when you get somebody through a licensing class, what do you do with them? If you don't engage them, you don't hand the phone to them. But where this trend is going, this is the percent of licensed hams that are ARRL members. And this is the concern. At some point, we're going to go to the FCC and say, we represent amateur radio, and they're going to say, no, you don't.
Is there a competing organization that's taking that?
It's not. And so if you look at some of the data that we have, current members, predominantly extra class, never members, new licensed hams, predominantly techs. And what they tell us, what they're interested in. We have data, as you can see this, right? 79% of new techs want support. How to operate first station, what rig to buy. Basic things. I was talking to somebody earlier, talking about a seminar where they're having people actually start a PL259 connectors on a piece of coax. You don't know how to do that, and you can still be a licensed ham. So they need some hand-holding. They need some mentoring. They want courses in amateur radio licensing and upgrading. They're interested in public service training. Generally, the same topics you can see. So we know this is what they want. We have this data, and we're developing things directly to this point. So as I said, how are we going to design things? I realize you probably know about ice skating down here in Tennessee, but very famous Boston hockey player. Skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it has been. And so how do you anticipate? How do we get us focused on the future? So what I learned in my startup job, right? Look at what Steve Jobs has done, right? But he says manage the top line. The bottom line will follow. But what is his definition of top line? What are we doing and why are we doing that? And if we lose sight of that, everything else is moving around, not moving forward. So trying to figure out what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we want to go, is what I'm going to talk about next. So instead of stove-piped businesses that I showed earlier, the way the league exists now, says, let's take a high-level look. What are we doing? We're creating value for amateur radio. We're disseminating the value, and we're advocating for amateur radio. And so how do I mean, what's the difference between publishing and creating value? And so somebody comes in with a book proposal.
Let's try it out there and see if we can get
Let's try that one. That one sounds better. That one's definitely better. Yeah, where's Bob Heil? And so somebody will send us a book proposal. We have an elaborate spreadsheet. We run through how many copies of the books we're going to sell and what's the price and what's the point where we're going to have a go, no-go decision. We may decide not to publish the book because we're not going to sell enough copies. But instead, let's say the person has brought us content. A book is a possible way of selling that, or it could be a piece of the way we sell that content. Maybe we take that content, we have a series of articles in QST, maybe we have a lifelong learning seminar, maybe we have a lesson or a podcast or something. All of a sudden we have multiple ways we're going to use that content, and we have a go decision where before we had a no-go decision. So we separate the idea of creating the value and disseminating the value and how we're going to use that. And so I think ARRL is uniquely positioned to create, curate, and deliver information on amateur radio. We really are. You know, as I said, today's it's books and magazines. Maybe tomorrow it'll be podcasts and wikis. A wiki with an ARRL brand. I tell the story. I was trying to change the struts on my daughter's hatchback. I couldn't get the bolts to move. And they're half-inch bolts. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? And I'm pushing and pushing and pushing. I said, there's got to be something I'm doing wrong. So I went online. I found a YouTube video from somebody in Australia. Said, there's locking glue on those bolts. Hit them with a cigarette lighter for 30 seconds. The bolts will pop. Sure they did. And then I realized, this is how I get information now. I don't go, when I used to buy cars, I'd buy the shop manual and you go through page and page and all the diagrams on how to do these things. I don't do that anymore. I go online, I find exactly what I'm looking for, and I use it. So ARRL needs to be that resource for amateur radio. And we can be. But we need to get out of the current mindset that we do this, this, and this. We've got to get into the mindset of creating value and making it available for people in the ways they're going to consume it. So my top priorities is a lifelong learning program based on the data we see, focused on emergency communications. That's what the new amateurs want. Doesn't mean we're going to abandon what we're doing, but it means we need to move into this, into the future. So to accomplish these changes, again, I'm going to quote Steve Jobs. More important than building the product is architecting the company. And so the company is the structure that's going to deliver the value that we want. And so I had to take a look at the organization. You really can't read that. I can't read it up here. But what's important is what I've highlighted in the blue or the gray, depending on how it's showing, is a thing called the Management Council. So this is all the senior leaders from all across ARRL staff that meets every 2 weeks. It's about 10 of us, small enough to sit around a small table, look each other in the eye, and actually have real discussion. We generate ideas, we debate ideas. And out of this process, we'll come up with a plan to do something new, some new product, some new service. And I'll turn to somebody and say, you have the monkey. By that I mean you got to feed it, you got to get the resources, you got to make sure we deliver something. And do that in a quick fashion. Let's not build up a permanent structure to support something. Let's not polish this thing. Let's get something out there quickly, try it, and see. One of the things that we're doing out of this is a magazine called On the Air. It's going to be coming out in January. It's going to be targeted towards new hams. It's going to be a free member benefit, so you can select to receive either it or QST in paper, but you can get both QST and On the Air in digital format. Ultimately, we'd like to be able to bring in a whole many magazines like On the Air, one for emergency communication, another for radio sport. QEX may be evolved into one of these things, NCJ evolved into one of these things, because people want specific content. Lifelong learning is another thing that came out of this. Changes. So, analyze, design for the future, implement. What I'm trying to do is change the direction of the oil tanker known as ARRL. It changes slowly, and I don't want to capsize the ship. If I make change too quickly, it'll capsize, right? So we're going from the stovepipe model that we have now into this value creation, value delivery, agile organization. It's going to be a 2 to 3 year process. It's actually changing, I think, quicker than I anticipated. The management council, all the senior people at headquarters have very much embraced the idea of this agile development. They're building teams on the fly, they're working with each other, they're it's flat in the organization. So I think it's the right direction, and we're going there quicker than I thought. But I still don't want to lose the tail of the organization, the staff, rest of the staff, and the members. So the focus is on this funnel, newly licensed hams. We want to get them active. If we can get them active, I think this is where we're losing the new licensed hams, is they're not getting active, right? How do we get them active? On the Air magazine, lifelong learning, podcasts, right? Part of that also needs to be the clubs. We need to energize the clubs. Because what we know is we can't just put material online and expect people to use it, right? They're not comfortable. They want some hands-on experience. Once we get them active, we can get them to join. We get them to join, we can retain them. So right now, you know, as I said, we lose most of the people who join, we lose within a year or two. The concept of On the Air magazine is that it's going to be a 2 to 3 year rolling content. But you can start your subscription any point in those 2 to 3 years, and you'll have something of value for newly licensed ham. Not just technicians, but newly licensed ham, and not just kids. We get some new hams in their 40s and 50s. But after 2 to 3 years, the content is going to be repetitive. But at that point, we anticipate people will actually switch to QST or one of the other mini magazines. Because if we can keep you for 2 or 3 years, we have you for life. The problem is, they join now, they don't find anything in QST, they say it's too technical. I get just the opposite complaint from other people, it's not technical enough, right? But they don't find value in the league. We're going to give them that initial value, and they're going to have a good feeling about ARRL, and then they're going to stay, and they're going to renew, and They're going to move into QST, they're going to move into QEX, they're going to move into other magazines that we're going to bring out there. So this is what the data tells us they're looking for. You can see it's not just clubs. It's not just putting them in contact with a dealer, right? They really need help how to get active. And what we've seen from the data and what educators know is how to get them active needs to be a blend of course content available to them and hand-holding and mentoring, elmering, right? And this is where we need to reach out to the clubs because the league can't do everything from Connecticut, nor do we intend to do everything from Connecticut. But we can provide you with material that you can work with somebody on a local basis. So how do we get them active? We look at analyzing the data. We need to personalize it. Everything today is about me. I customize everything right on my computer. I come up, world is that way. People expect that. You buy something from Amazon, next time you're on Amazon it says, you bought this, you probably want that, right? We need to get to that way. So part of that, and this is actually a photo from a firm that we're using called Mince & Hoke. They took a look at our data. And different colors with different aspects of data. And then they started grouping these things. And they wound up with 5 different, what they call personas. 5 different characteristics of a typical member in that group. You can't customize everything for 157,000 members in 157,000 ways. Nor does one size fit all. And so what they've done is they've actually developed 5 personas. They didn't start with 5 personas. The 5 personas themselves came out of the data. How do these people naturally group each other? Again, you can't read it, but this is the personas. One is, we call Doug the Rookie. This is the newly licensed ham. This is the person that we're targeting for right now. Other ones up there are the Guardian. Average age of the Guardian is 78 years old. But these are the people that have been licensed for 50, 60, 70 years, some of them. They want the traditions of the hobby protected. I'm probably one of those. Not quite 70 years old, but almost. Another one is a technologist. I may also be a technologist. This is the people that are more interested in the technology. Technology fascinates them. We also have Jeff the Ready up in the upper right corner. This is somebody whose primary interest is in emerging communications, public service. And then we have the lapsed member, unfortunately. So one of my editorials earlier in the year, I took a look at those 5 personas and said, okay, I need a way to get my mind wrapped around how to deal with that. And I created what I call the spectrum of hams. So left to right, you view amateur radio as a hobby to a service. And the vertical axis is technology to communications. And every ham, at every point in his ham career, is some point on that grid. More than likely, every ham is a path through that grid. And it's probably a soft spot. You kind of have a varied interest. But this allows me to focus on characteristics that we can develop content for. So I think the Guardians, for the most part, if you're viewing yourself as a Guardian, ham radio is a hobby and it's about communicating. It doesn't mean you don't take the rig apart, but your primary emphasis is on communicating, DXCC, contesting, those kind of things. Opposite that is the person who also views it as communications, but his primary emphasis is on service. This is somebody interested in public service. He views amateur radio as a means to help the community that he lives in. And then the bottom left, the technologist, He likes to take the radio apart more than he likes to operate it, right? There's a few of those in the room. I may be one of those, right? You know, and I view it as a hobby. And then somebody said to me, well, you know, you're missing something in the lower right. I said, that's opportunity. What do we have to create for people who view amateur radio as a service from a technology standpoint? And I got a lot of ideas from forums like this where people have suggested, you know, the last one I got is somebody suggested that's the hacker community. These people are trying to improve the technology, right? So as I said, I see opportunity, right? And when I was a professor, I'd have, you know, PhD students come to me and they'd say, what research topic should I work on? I said, I'm not going to tell you. Because the hard part about a PhD is not answering the question. The hard part is asking the right question. And until you figure out how to ask the right question, you're never going to be a PhD. So the same kind of mindset is here. More important than getting the answer is what is the opportunity? Where can we do things differently? How do we do things differently? What is the question we're trying to answer? And so that's pretty much where I'm going with ARRL. And I guess at this point I'm going to turn over to questions. Questions? I put everybody to sleep. Sure.
Howard, thank you so much for bringing this to the group. One of the things that I noticed, because of the role that I have in my day job, is that I found many things from amateur radio that I'm able to actually apply in my day job. It would be interesting to figure out a way to bring that to other people and to say, here, this is the benefit that you bring, not only in your amateur radio hobby or fun life, but also as part of your day-to-day living. And then it actually helps us to succeed. I've got a lot of notes that I took here. I'm a Scrum Master, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm wondering if I can get an SEU, number one. And number two, you know, I took some things that I am going to bring back to work and try them just because of the things you've brought. It'd be interesting if we could actually help other hands to do that as well. It could open some more doors to the 30, 40, 50-year-olds that are still in the day job community.
I appreciate the comment. I appreciate the understanding. And to take that one step further, right? You know, imagine, you know, you're a young employee someplace, in your 20s, 30s, or something like that. The boss says, I want you to organize, you know, the picnic for the company. You've never done anything like that. Imagine instead, a 20 or 30-year-old, you're a ham club member, you organize events like this. You know, people who've done this before are going to give you critiques, and you're going to be able to fail in a safe environment and learn from the environment, as opposed to when the boss says, you didn't do this. So there's a lot of different ways that we can, just from the camaraderie, from the technology, from the public service aspects, expand your mind, you know, and convince people this is why you should belong to the club. This is why you should do amateur radio. So, okay. I think who's got the? Oh, you got it. Okay.
Howard, I've already had two questions. Same question asked me if they could get a copy of the PowerPoint that you've used this morning. If that's possible, you can send it to me and I'll forward it out to them.
I can do that.
Thank you.
I don't need the mic. I can break the pile up. One of the things as a former president of a not-for-profit amateur radio club for 7 years, what we tried to do was sorry that you on hello radio check break. Okay. One of the things that our organization did 10 years ago was we combined the technician and general class training into one training, so that we weren't creating handy-talkie operators. We were creating assets for us to use, be it a parade, be it and I'm from New Orleans, so that's why I said parade, be it a multiple sclerosis bike run, be it a hurricane, God forbid, so that those people would have more tools in the toolbox to use when it came time to actually sit in front of a microphone and pass traffic. One of the questions I have going along with the things that you're talking about, podcasts, etc., where are we or where can we be in creating these classes to go along with our study guides, creating podcasts so that the organizations, the special service clubs, etc., and affiliated clubs can use that for their training and teaching and bringing in new hands and elmering these folks with a continuing education program, as it were, so that we maintain the technicians who lose interest after 6 months.
You're absolutely right, and we're actually moving in that direction, right? In a couple of different ways, right? So events like this, there may be some good speakers, not me, right? But there may be some good speakers that you want to record. And then somebody has a club meeting and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do for the program. How do we connect those two, right? We need to have a resource available for the clubs, for the local organizations. Same thing with licensing, right? So we're creating the online lifelong learning program. We're going to put material there. I think we're going to develop material across the spectrum that clubs could use. As I said, my view is that we create an infrastructure at headquarters that creates a base that allows local organizations to multiply their effort. Instead of every organization have to create something that is essentially the same, which is a waste of effort, we make it available and then you can customize it. So not just New Hamp's, across the whole spectrum is the vision. So
Emergency services.
exactly.
Thank you. I was born and raised in this hobby, and my wife will tell you that I don't know any different, that it's more than a hobby. I think one area that hams in general, clubs in general, when the VE program came out, I thought, boy, this is really going to take off. But the majority of clubs, as I get around Middle Tennessee and from Maine, where I moved from, they don't follow up after a VE test session. They don't assign somebody to be their mentor. They don't really go out of their way to invite them to a club meeting if you have to go and pick them up. That's been missed from day one. And I said to some of my friends, I said, this will never fly because there's no follow-up. And if you miss the follow-up, you're in trouble. I've managed 28 people in Tennessee since I've been here 9 years. I enjoy that. That's what my father did before I was born. And somehow that's got to get turned around real quick. And once it does, that'll increase our membership here, just not to mention just getting more hams on the air.
You're absolutely right. And so if any of you were at Dayton this year, we had brought in the National Amateur Radio Club, Nashua, New Hampshire, doing exactly what you're talking about. And they've grown from a small club of tens of people to over 200, exactly doing that thing. They have a licensing class, but once you get licensed, you have somebody that's going to work with you. And so all the clubs need to do this. And so what we're trying to do is make some of this, best practices available to people. We can't make people do things, but we can show them the value of doing things, and you're exactly right. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Go ahead, sure.
I'm wondering, what kind of events does the ARRL headquarters do for, the interest hams to come and visit headquarters? Is there anything?
It's
So we have a visitor's tour program. We give you a tour around the headquarters. I'm not quite sure anybody wants to go and visit the headquarters. It's an office building, right? But they want to see the lab. They want to see W1AW. They want to talk to the people. So we do those kind of things.
It should be on everybody's bucket list.
It should be.
It's a great thing.
What about
the
contest? Are all the rooms full at W1AW contest?
So no, unfortunately not. We actually had, though, a social event that we did for the headquarters staff. We had a sprint, so everybody had a little 2-meter rig, and we had 15 minutes worth of trying to work all. We didn't call it zones. What do we call it? It was zones. Okay, so we divided headquarters building into the VE zone, the radio sports zone, the executive suite zone. And I'm going to put a plug in for my assistant, Carla. She's pretty new ham. Yeah. She had the highest overall score. So. I could say it's because you guys gave me a radio that didn't work. So. Okay.
Just a quick, is there anything in the future like MPOTA? I think that really got people involved, and I would love to see something like that in the future.
So for 2021, we're actually going to have, the theme is going to be University Clubs on the Air. And it's not going to just be operating, that's going to be part of it, but it's going to be how to get the clubs active and engaged. And some of what we're doing is actually working with, IEEE has student branches. IEEE has an honor society called Eta Kappa Nu that has student chapters, and we have university clubs. And all these organizations at the universities are struggling because they need to have something for their members to do to get engaged. So we're working on that. We're working on working with the manufacturer to have a $5 solder it, build it yourself receiver, AM receiver, and a transmitter. And so you can imagine. Okay, you can imagine. You know, your Boy Scouts and the young club around here, instead of soldering the paper, they solder a receiver and transmitter within an hour. They can actually go out and communicate. This one's dying.
A $5 kit.
$5 kit. And so, you know, we could do those kind of things at the universities. So we're actually trying to engage people in multiple aspects of amateur radio. So I think that's it for the questions. I think we'll see David, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So David, you're up. Thank you. Thank you.